Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing okay this morning. It is 9:21 in the a.m. Let me check my sound. Guys, if you like what I'm putting down, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the patron. I always give the heads up. And also, I missed some comments on the last video, so I want to give them out now. Baltazar. Breaking news. In 2019, Hillary Clinton decries Romulans from entering Earth's times traveling with Russian robots to hack Joy Ann Reid's blog. Space Force, the only way to find out where Hillary Clinton and Romulan Emmanuel's opinions on humanity came from. Why isn't this NASA's over DOD? It's hilarious. Why isn't this NASA's over Department of Defense? That's a good question, right? Why doesn't NASA take this project as opposed to the Department of Defense? Joshua Renshaw. I'm waiting for Hillary Clinton to blame the election on alien mind control beams and Trump waiting to build a space wall to stop the shithole planets from sending us their best aliens. Space Force, because 5 million illegal aliens from Andromeda voted in 2106 galactic elections. This is when you watch 50 seconds of space movies in bed. That's awesome. Thank you guys, I appreciate it. I missed the comments on the last video. I am sorry. I will pay more attention. I didn't see these at the end of the video. So this video is a little different. This video is dramatically different from the previous video, seeing this previous video was 420. Brexit. Brexit has gotten completely exciting. Like it's I was trying to get to the story the other day, but I needed to learn a little bit more about what was taking place. Britain is so bizarre. They're in an interesting constitutional, it's not a crisis, but it's all right, let me explain it this way, because I need a bit of wood to chop for the American audience who doesn't know what's taking place. Brexit took place. And Brexit taking place, nobody knew what Brexit meant. People would say Brexit means Brexit, but you had to essentially make a determination on how you were going to leave the EU. Was it going to be a hard Brexit or soft Brexit? Meaning, is it going to be more closely to we're out, we're done, and we're going to find other places to make trade deals? Or is it's going to be kind of out, where we're going to interact closely with them, and we're going to keep continuity with the single market? If you keep continuity with the single market, newsflash, you're not really out, because your rules and laws are still going to have to bend towards whatever the rules and laws that allows you to be in the single market. Not to mention free movement of people and all this other stuff. Not to mention, this created another problem with the Irish border, seeing as the Republic of Ireland is in the EU and Northern Ireland is not. There were problems with this. And the question becomes, how do you solve Brexit? Theresa May has had this inglorious role of trying to mend this. The previous prime minister failed in a vote because he thought, just like the people, Clinton supporters thought, that it was going to be a cakewalk and that people were going to choose to stay in the EU. There's no way people would choose to leave the EU. It's impossible. It's inconceivable. It would never take place until it took place. And Britain said, I'm done. Throwing the largest brick that it can get its hands onto into the windows of the establishment, screaming, do you hear us now? Do you hear us now? Theresa May has been trying to take them out the EU. This has been fraught with all sorts of difficulty that you can imagine, especially since she's decided to take the hard Brexit route. This has not been without serious divisions, even within her own camp. In this case, she's had some people who are Remainers or who want to keep a closer tie to the single market. Same thing is taking place in Labour. Labour said we're going to, for the most part, take us out. Not to the degree of a hard Brexit, but if I'm being honest, Labour's position on this is somewhat comical. But they're in opposition, and they are not the ones who are actually doing it. And yes, he's going to try to use this for political effect because he's trying to take power. That's what people in power try to do. That being said, there are several people in Theresa May's camp that would prefer to remain, or at the very least would prefer to remain closer ties. Now, step away from that for the moment to the way British political system is set up. They have the Commons, elected leaders who essentially come from their various districts and boroughs or whatever, and you have the Lords. Now, the Lords, in the largest sense, at least to me, has been somewhat invisible in most of the proceedings or most of the years that I've watched PMQs. They're not invisible now. They're not invisible now in the least, because they may have seemed invisible, but ultimately they need to be paid attention to, because they also get a say in whether or not a law gets passed. So Theresa May comes up with her group in the Commons. It ended up in the House of Lords, and the House of Lords said, no, we don't like this. We don't like this. We don't like this hard Brexit stuff. We don't like this. And the House of Lords sent it back. Commons sends it back to the House of Lords, and the House of Lords says, we don't like this. Now, my point in this is the House of Lords is knocking back what Theresa May is trying to do. And the House of Lords is trying to make this argument that you need to give Parliament a meaningful vote at the end of this process. Meaning, if at the end of your negotiations you come out with something, Parliament should get a meaningful vote on that. The question is, what the hell does meaningful vote mean? Now, one party may think meaningful vote just means you get an opinion. The other may think meaningful vote means they get to actually vote on the legislation at the end of the process. Who are the House of Lords, you may ask? House of Lords are not elected at all. They're not an elected body. At one point, the House of Lords used to be the people that essentially the kings and noblemen will put, in their staff in order to be their advisors, their board of advisors of sorts. So you had the Commons, you had the House of Lords. Well, at some point, this started to break down where the Commons started to take more of a prominence, seeing as they were elected leaders. But the House of Lords still was there. They expanded the ranks of the people who were allowed in the House of Lords. But ultimately, Commons, in this case, is being undermined by the House of Lords, or at the very least, let's say, held in check. You can say it in both ways. It depends on your perspective. Either held in check or undermined. It depends on your perspective by the House of Lords. This is fascinating because it is going for a vote this morning coming from the House of Lords, in which they've added an amendment that tries to force the Prime Minister to have a meaningful vote. And they're bringing this up for a vote. And the Prime Minister is going to face the Remainers down. She's not bending on what she wants from the standpoint of the Brexit negotiations. Meaning, this may end up back in the House of Lords. This is fascinating. They've sent out their whips in order to get their people in line to make sure the Prime Minister wins that vote. Because if she doesn't win that vote, oh God. Oh God. So let's see how this took place, because there's a little drama associated with this. I'm sorry, it's a lot of wood to chop. I know it's drama. It's British politics. The Prime Minister was able to get the House of Lords to not add an amendment or table an amendment about the meaningful vote stuff. Meaning there was an amendment that was on the table that the Prime Minister was able to convince the people to not allow to go through. Under the idea that she will add language that would give them some kind of vote in the end of the process. Now, they say that the Prime Minister lied to them, or at the very least misled them, and that what ended up in the bill was not what they thought was going to take place. So, House of Lords ends up putting through an amendment with even more support, telling the Prime Minister to give Parliament a meaningful vote. I'm sorry, I know that's a lot of wood to chop. It took 9 minutes for that, but it was backstory. Brexit meaningful vote, how the role has unfolded. After the two Lords' defeat for the government, the battle returns to the Commons. As a debated and much attended section of the EU withdrawal bill returns to the Commons on Wednesday for a potential crucial vote, Amendment 19 seeks to give Parliament the final say on the Brexit deal, but how much say has varied wildly between its various inclinations. This is the progress so far. Now, I'm going to go to right here. More accurately, this was both Grieve 2 and Helmsman 2, and The Hague again proposed the motion. This was passed by peers on Monday evening by a bigger margin than the First Amendment majority of 119. The new amendment will give Parliament a say if the MP vote down a deal or if there was no deal reached by the 21st of 2019. Meaning, if at the end of the process Parliament says nay to what the government wants, the government says this is what we want for Brexit to end this deal, for Brexit negotiation deal, and the Parliament says no, we don't like that, we think you give away too much, or we think this is going to adversely affect Britain, then they want Parliament to get a say in the end of the process. Meaning they don't want the government to just say we'll just cut ties. They want to prevent the government from doing that. The government says this ties our hand. While this version would allow MPs to amend the government motion, the effect of any direction they give would have no legal basis. It would put great political pressure on ministers to follow Parliament's lead, but if they did not, then this could not be challenged in courts. The battle returns to Commons. The government has put in place a 3-line whip for the Tory MPs for the amendment's return on Wednesday and hopes to defeat it. Downing Street has said the government will table its own amendment again without any changes or compromise deals with the rebels. Number 10 has said it could not accept Grieve 2, arguing it would tie the government's hands and would make the deal less likely. The new amendment will give Parliament a say if the MP is voted down. Yeah, they are trying to avoid this no-deal Brexit. You got to understand, one of the amendments I was able to get through was they get a final say, yay or nay. Is this a deal that you guys are willing to go along with? Now, the belief is that the government will most likely be hurt by whatever deal they put through. Theresa May has been going with this idea that there was going to be a kickback and that money was going to go into the NHS. They find out and they're not going to be a kickback at all. In fact, they're going to be to the worse, which means they're going to have to make up the funding for the NHS in a different way. Here's the second part to this, or the third part to this. The Remainers are trying to hobble Brexit. Let's be honest. Now, I've said it before. I don't necessarily have a dog in this hunt. I don't have positive or negative feelings about Brexit. I have concerns. Based on what I've been seeing. But those concerns aren't through a lens of I want Brexit or I don't want Brexit. So understand when I say this, I'm not politically bent in one way or the other. The Remainers are doing what I expect the Remainers to do. You have a bunch of people who want to stay in the EU or stay associated with the EU, and they are using whatever political and legal means that they can to try to do that. One of the ways that they're trying to affect that is that they completely know that when that bill comes up for a vote, that bill is going to be somewhat of a platypus, a weird looking animal, in which case they are going to have to vote on that weird looking animal. And they may vote nay. And if they vote nay, they don't want this thing of the ejected out of the EU, because they believe that Britain will be materially hurt worse. That being said, can they use this as a way of saying we want a final say, using this final say in order to manipulate how Brexit ends up? The government doesn't want this because the government knows that this is a way to stymie Brexit. If you give the people a say who don't want to leave the EU at the end of the EU, they will probably choose not to leave the EU. It's like a second referendum of sorts, but it's a referendum through the back door, if that makes sense. There's another story on this right here. New Lords defeat for government on Brexit meaningful vote amendment. And like I said, they're going to vote on this again today. The government has been defeated in a landslide vote of the Lords, which set up another common showdown over an amendment to give the MPs a meaningful vote even if the government fails to reach a Brexit deal. Even if you don't get a deal, we want a say. The House of Lords voted in favor of a new amendment devised by Tory MP and pro-EU rebel Dominic Grieve and tabled by Viscount Haleslam by a significant bigger margin than the last time the issue was debated. The amendment was passed 354 votes to 235 by a majority of 119. Let's see. Right here. Halesman, the former Conservative cabinet minister Douglas Hogg, tabled the last-minute amendment on Monday morning based on the deal Grieve believed he had struck with Solicitor General Robert Buckland in order to avert a government defeat in the Commons by pro-EU Tories. Grieve said later he was double-crossed and the government went back on the agreement he had reached. Ministers tabled an amendment that would mean the vote only on a neutral motion, which would give MPs no power to halt a cliff-edge Brexit, a change that Grieve said meant the compromise was unacceptable. Grieve is trying to say that the government said they were going to do X and they end up doing Y, saying that he was double-crossed. They double-crossed me in this, in which case he retabled his amendment. Now, after feeling double-crossed, the number of votes that Grieve was able to get for this expanded, means the House of Lords is being more emphatic in saying, no, we want a vote. Give Parliament a vote. Meaning they don't want, again, they don't want the situation of a no-deal Brexit. That the government not being able to get a deal just goes off of a cliff. They want to vote. I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like they're using this as a way to stop Brexit. Halesman tabled an amendment which he said was based on the original deal dubbed Grieve 2, which he said would give MPs the chance to vote in Parliament even if the event of a no deal. Speaking in the House of Lords, Halesman said, I'm asking your lordship to make a decision to enable the House of Commons to vote on what Mr. Grieve believes was agreed with the government. Halesman and Grieve was a man of the utmost personal and professional integrity and said he accepted his version of events without reservation. He said the government's offer not only fails to deliver the promised meaningful vote, but is far worse. It is seeking to make it impossible. It deliberately removes the possibility. You didn't give us the chance for a meaningful vote. You actually even excluded the possibility that you've used what we said in Orwellian terms. Under the new amendment, ministers must update Parliament by the 21st of January 2019. If there's no prospect of a deal with the EU, then have 2 weeks to return to the House of Commons with a statement on how the government plans to proceed. MPs will be given a vote on whether to approve the actions in statement. The Commons will vote on the revised amendment on Wednesday, though government sources have said they are confident Tory rebels do not have the numbers to pass it. Wow. This is fucking exciting. This is awesome. This is awesome. This is taking place right now in the UK. Jamal, Brexit benefits rich people who want to avoid paying taxes, offshoring the wealth. Other EU efforts to force companies to pay taxes will be avoided by Brexit. Log 66, yes, that is the right-wing perspective of Brexit, that they are going to try to use it to lower taxes, to cut regulations and so forth. There's also a lefty argument for Brexit, in that any plans that you want to take on from the standpoint of Jeremy Corbyn will not be able to be enacted under a EU government. It goes both ways. Freedom goes both ways. People can use it for awesome things or they can use it for really shitty things. It goes both ways. Yeah, it goes both ways. UK is a world bank in any sense of the term. It won't turn into a welfare state. I don't know, Garden. You're talking about other countries trying to take away the banking from the UK after this. I mean, you're talking about companies draining support. EU telling companies that, hey, maybe you need to deal with other companies in the EU as opposed to using products from Britain because we are no longer going to be, or Britain is no longer going to be part of the EU. They are going to take a hit. I mean, I'm sorry. I am neutral towards Brexit from the standpoint of good or bad. But my feeling is Britain is going to take a hit. And I think Boris Johnson even made this argument when he was going on his rant about that stuff, that he understood that they were going to take a hit. He just didn't care they were going to take a hit. A lot of them are detached from the consequences of their decisions. And that's somewhat of the problem. Boris Johnson is never going to go without him ill, nor is he going to be adversely affected by Brexit per se. Boris Johnson is going to be perfectly okay. Many of those people, Rees Mogg is going to be perfectly okay with his monocle. They're not going to be completely adversely affected by the decisions that take place with Brexit. They could be, pro-Brexit and everything else. The small businessman who has business going with the EU that gets his business cut because now you're dealing with international affairs, they're going to be adversely affected. They're going to be adversely affected. This idea of making trade deals somewhere else, where? Where are you going to make up that deficit of trade deals that you have with the EU? Look, it's not that I don't think Britain could recover and everything else in time, but let's be honest. In the short term, they're going to take a hit. Scotland wants to stay because they can trade. Yes. Yes. And let's see. And just while everyone is here, I want to read this one more time because I screwed up and I missed these comments on the last video. The last video was a 420 on Space Force and Donald Trump. Breaking news: in 2019, Hillary Clinton decries Romulans from entering Earth for time traveling with Russian robots to hack Joy Ann Reid's blog. Baltazar. Space Force. The only way to find out what Hillary Clinton and Romulan Emmanuel's opinions on humanity came from. Why isn't this NASA's over Department of Defense? Yes, I question that too. I'm waiting for Hillary Clinton to blame the election on alien mind control beams and Trump wanting to build a space wall to stop the shithole planets from sending us their best aliens. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Space Force because 5 million illegal aliens from Andromeda voted in 2106 galactic elections. This is when you watch 50s space movies in bed. Lost in space. Lost in space. I don't like monocles. I don't like monocles at all. They're dramatically unnecessary and posturing. Pet Hacker, what exactly is Scotland trading with the EU? Do they want the EU to tell them what sheep they can raise? Pat, that's funny. I asked the same question, right? So it's like Scotland wants to get out of the UK and into the EU, and it's like, for what? For what? Like, what do you think you're going to get from the person who you're with, the country that you're with, the devil that you know, versus this, monolithic thing that's far away from you in some other country? I don't understand what they think they're going to get out of this. Hungary and Italy are leaving. They won't be many. If Italy leaves the UK, you're talking about the breaking of Europe. It will be fundamentally different. Yeah, you're talking about a breaking of Europe at that point. So I'll leave it here. I'm not going to keep this one too long. Thank you guys for showing up. I have another video after this. Let's get back to domestic politics. I will see you guys shortly. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. And Balthazar, Joshua, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.